Hello. The coming millennium was a time of raving madmen, wild conspiracies, and impending apocalypse. And that was true whether you lived in the real world or the old world. So what better time could there be for Games Workshop to release a mighty tome of horror and adventure? I'm Jordan, this is Jordan Sorcery, and today it's time for the making of Mordheim. Mordheim, City of the Damned was released in 1999 and took for its setting the same year in the imperial calendar. It was a time when the empire was fractured amidst many claims on the imperial throne, and into that already febrile environment would fall a devastating comet, one that would destroy a city and draw to the ruins fortune hunters, religious fanatics, and creatures even more dangerous. The game focuses on warbands of around 10 models, and encourages kit bashes and conversions. It places narrative at the heart of its gameplay and campaign systems. In short, it's relatively cheap and accessible. It offers endless hobby potential and near infinite replayability. And that's before we even talk about the art and the story. There is a reason that this is still considered one of Games Workshop's best ever games. If you enjoy this video, please give it a like and feel free to leave a comment. And if you really want to support the channel, then why not take a look at my Patreon via the link in the description below. My patrons actually voted for this video to be a priority, so if you want the chance to inform what I look at next, it's a great opportunity to do so. Development of Mordheim started as something of an experiment. Fueled by an idea that had been discussed with Rick Priestley, designer Tuomas Pirinen set about playing around with a set of Warhammer-based skirmish rules. So, Pirinen began putting together an initial game system. It was closely tied to the Warhammer 5th edition rules, making it easier for existing players to get into the game, and creating a small-scale entry-level game for new players who weren't ready to field full armies yet. Though, much like its older 40k sibling Necromunda, the simplicity of its core rules would belie a rich and sophisticated depth. The way in which list building, campaign mechanisms, and the cruel randomness of fate interacted in this game would make it into something wonderful to behold. Inspired by J.R.R. Tolkien, Pirinen has said that the best place to start when creating a new world is with a map. So, with the help of the Perry twins, he built one. A version of the city of Mordheim was constructed using pieces of the Mighty Empires game, and supplemented with bespoke new townhouses and buildings sculpted by the Perrys. The broad layout of Mordheim and the subsequent buildings in the Damned City itself were inspired by Games Workshop's spiritual home, the city of Nottingham. The fortress of the Rock taking the place of Nottingham Castle atop a central rocky mound around which the rest of the city sprawls. And without the internet being as readily available at the time, the creative team found themselves wandering the streets of Nottingham, taking photos of era-appropriate buildings that could inspire illustrations and terrain in the game. Alongside the map came a story, a simple setup with a profound array of potential opportunity. In the year of the imperial calendar 1999, a comet fell from the sky. Unlike the twin-tailed comet that heralded the arrival of Sigmar, this comet heralded only death and destruction. It struck the imperial city of Mordheim in Ostermark and pretty much leveled it. In the chaos and madness that followed, it was discovered that the remains of the comet possessed unique magical properties, and this weird stone would draw the unwanted eyes of the enlightened, the envious, and the evil.
At that point in time, it's one of the running joke at Games Workshop was about the Y2K virus and the end of the Mayan calendar and how the world is going to end at year 2000, which we found absolutely hilarious. So this was just a discussion with Rick that what if it was real, except we can't do that in the real life, but we can do it in Warhammer world, and we can't make the world end. But we can have a similar sort of like this millennial build-up, is then actually have something to happen.
Even from the outset, Pirinen was keen that Mordheim would be a fiction-driven game, where flavour and creativity would be given priority over strict game balance. The first public evidence of the experimental Mordheim playtest came in issue 223 of White Dwarf, in an article by Pirinen himself. Although it wasn't quite yet the finished article, it emerged as a near fully formed gaming experience. Game development would usually take between 12 and 18 months at Games Workshop, and the full Mordheim box would arrive roughly within a year of the first playtest article. There was always going to be a Mordheim release, unless the feedback from the article had been overwhelmingly negative, but that's not to say that the feedback didn't inform the development of the final product. In fact, there's a thank you in the core book for those fans who submitted their ideas off the back of those articles. The spirit of fan submissions and homebrew rules making their way into the formal game system is one that Pirinen is a keen advocate of. He himself joined Games Workshop after submitting articles to the Citadel Journal, and it would be something that stayed with Mordheim right through to the end of its run, through the open pages of the Town Crier. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Warhammer Fantasy Battles in the mid-90s had taken on a particular feel, one that was more accessible to younger gamers and which, while still featuring plenty of bloody themes and imagery, was altogether less grim and dark. The game's rules formed the foundation on which Mordheim was built, but the style would see a stark divergence. There was a phenomenal art team working on the 4th and 5th editions of Warhammer, but one particular artistic mind was less personally engaged with that vision for the setting: the Games Workshop art director, John Blanche.
John is a kind of man who resonates with other people's creativity. He's so astoundingly creative that he's drawn into creative processes by nature, and we just jive together. We've never had a one crossword between us ever in all the years that we worked together. So Mordheim got him really fired up. He once had like the entire project that he could sort of, I hate to use the word direct, but guide. Because he's a big believer that the artists can create their own art, but that there would be a unified vision, so that there would be a Games Workshop game that was true to how he saw Warhammer World in his mind, which is a much, much more grimmer and darker and grittier. And if you look at what the 5th edition was, which was the colorful, cartoony, kind of kiddie-friendly, he went to the other end of the deep pool. It's and that's why Mordheim is so visually unique.
The flexibility of the project, unshackled from the core game systems, and the unique nature of the background and concept all served to excite the team who were working on the game. Pirinen recalls that the entire design studio was energized by it, and that whilst the artists in particular were really able to let rip, everyone was deeply invested. People literally worked late hours against the wishes of the management. Gav Thorpe crafted some excellent stories that also became the basis of the Ulia Markand comics. Rick Priestley wrote absolutely cracking background to the Witch Hunters, which still makes me chuckle when I read it today. Me and Alessio played countless matches and discussed how to blend skirmish wargaming with narrative. I worked with Alan Merritt and others designing a way to create affordable and extremely flexible plastic sprues for the warbands. The game was released in 1999 as a complete boxed set. Inside, you would find the core rulebook, a range of card terrain, dice, rulers, tokens, and 2 warbands, human mercenaries, and Skaven scavengers. The core rulebook was written by Tuomas Pirinen with help from Rick Priestley and Alessio Cavatore, and it covered the backstory of Mordheim, the rules, the core warbands, how to play campaigns, income and trading, hired swords and dramatis personae, and optional rules as well. The cover painting for the box is called Vision of Mordheim, and it was painted by Jeff Taylor. Some of the incredible details of this magnificent piece include a cat-headed man, some kind of bottle containing 3 birds, and of course, a man carrying a box with a pig eating a fish eating an insect inside it. The piece absolutely evokes the twisted complexity of Hieronymus Bosch, just like it was aiming for. Interior art was led by John Blanche, with Alex Boyd, David Gallagher, Nuala Kennedy, Carl Kopinski, Paul Smith, and John Wigley, all producing some career-best work. There is just so much character and story in the art of Mordheim, illustrations that ask 100 questions and offer only impossible answers. I mean, just look at some of this awesome stuff. Rat riding fish, pig riding cockroach, drum playing bear, gun toting bear, fish.
Of course, it wasn't just John. I mean, I had such a who's who list of artists. I had Carl Kopinski, I had Dave Gallagher, I had John Wigley, the Paul. There was all these people who became these very, very, very revered artists who were then young and hungry, who all got into this.
This thoroughly Blanchian vision of the Warhammer world would be seen again, joining Tuomas Pirinen in developing and evolving the Warhammer world for its 6th edition. As John Blanche said, this was the Mordheim effect. It is also worth noting that the graphic design of the book is incredible. Compositions and layouts were by John Blanche himself alongside Alan Merritt and Talima Fox, and they are just awesome. Every page is wrapped in detail and interest, and it only ever overwhelms in exactly the right way. As with the art, the writing for the game followed a technique that was common in the Games Workshop design studio at the time, called the closed door. Pirinen explained it in a 2018 Reddit AMA. While this may be different now, during my time at the design studio we used a method called the closed door. We added mysterious, hinted at aspects to the fiction, maybe just mentioned in passing, to create mystery and questions in the minds of the fans, without any immediate plans on deciding what that fiction piece actually is. It could be a Lost Space Marine Legion, Primarch, mythical hero, lost continent or planet, or anything else. Then we'd return to it years later and flesh it out properly, and fans would think in amazement that we planned it like that from the beginning, which was not true. Almost all super secret groups in Warhammer 40k mythos were like that. Coupled with Pirinen's intention to put story at the heart of the game, it meant for an immersive experience that could be deeply invested in. The rules enabled you to create a warband that you cared about and that would evolve over time through campaign play. And with the cruel randomness of fate, it would create dramatic storytelling. Perhaps drawing on inspirations like the original Realm of Chaos books, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and Necromunda, there were copious amounts of random tables as well. Income, serious injuries, critical hits, exploration, and many possibilities for huge swings in luck. In fact, the game would share a good deal more with these 3 games, taking the chaotic design principles of Realm of Chaos, the grubby low-level action of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and the skirmish campaigning of Necromunda. 3 of Games Workshop's best, synthesized into one brew that was altogether different and dark. A physical example of the closed-door approach to myth-making and storytelling could actually be found in the components in the starter box. There is an in-universe tarot card that depicts the Comet of Sigmar and an aspect of Moor. You can even see it on the front cover of the box, and it is a beautiful piece. But this card serves no game function. It exists purely to exist. You could create rules for it yourself or wait until Games Workshop published some semi-official ones later on in its run. But it wasn't really there to enhance gameplay. Like much of the lore of Mordheim, it was there simply to pose an unanswerable question, to leave you fumbling around in the dark for a secret that was just out of reach. There was more card included in the box in the form of card terrain. It represented the remains of the damned city, bombed out and largely destroyed by the apocalyptic comet that had struck it down. This terrain was developed in response to what Pirinen believes to be the most inert feature of the battlefield, the sealed house.
The worst possible piece of terrain, if you are playing a miniature game, is a house. Because imagine it, because it's closed box.
Yeah.
That you kind of think you should be able to interact with, but there's a usually slanted for whatever. So terrible for playing game. But if you drop a comet on the city, so all the houses are broken, so all the interesting bits inside become available, and you have this the multi-layered the gaming space. It suddenly becomes super exciting and interesting.
There was always an intention for the game to keep it relatively low level, and in terms of magic and fantasy, relatively limited. Although the setting remained fantastic in the true sense of the word, it was one where the battles that took place weren't supposed to be between armies of noble knights and dragon-riding champions. They were supposed to be like the kind of dirty, brutal knife fight you'd have in the back alley behind the ten-tailed cat. So there would be no units of noble high elves, gaggles of chaotic demons, or rabbles of raucous goblins in this game. It would be a far more human affair. To start with, the game came with rules for 6 different warbands. The cult of the possessed was composed of mutants, cultists, and beastmen, all pledged to serve the so-called Dark Emperor, an agent of chaos loose amongst the ruins of this damned city. The Sisters of Sigmar are an order of warrior nuns who are on a holy mission to punish those who have become mad in Mordheim, and to gather up the shards of Weirdstone in the name of Sigmar. The Witch Hunters, or Templars of Sigmar, stand at odds with the Sisters, believing them to be heretics and sinners. The Witch Hunters have taken to Mordheim at the behest of the Grand Theogonist, intent on finishing the righteous crusade of death that the Comet has started. Mercenary bands from the many lands of the Empire have come to ply their trade and seek out spoils for themselves. Some hail from Middenheim, others from Reichland, and still more arrive from the great port city of Marienburg. And the Weirdstone has drawn to it parties still more nefarious as well. Under orders from Vlad von Carstein, a vampiric and necromantic pall has fallen on the ruins of Mordheim, as the foul undead seek to claim the Weirdstone in aid of their Dark Lord's magical designs. And finally, but by no means leastly, there were the Skaven. Just some good rat boys trying to do their best. The Ratmen of Clan Eschen tail fighting their way through the city in search of precious Weirdstone, for they know it by another name. Warpstone. With the starter set providing everything you need to play, they could have just left it there and the game would still be a classic. But the design team had more ideas. And weirder ideas. A separate pack of card buildings was released in 1999 called Blood on the Streets. The name harks back to the terrain pack from Warhammer 2nd Edition, published in 1985, which also included a range of cardstock buildings. The Mordheim set centered on a ruined coaching inn, with a gatehouse and several ruined wall sections and corners designed to expand your tabletop terrain. For 6 issues of White Dwarf following the game's release, a full section of the magazine was dedicated to Mordheim. These sections took their name from the weekly campaign update that Pirinen had shared with the players in the Design Studio playtest campaign. It was called The Town Crier, and it featured yet more wonderful and immersive art. To be honest, these pages count amongst some of my favourite in White Dwarf history. Prior to starting development on Mordheim, Pirinen had been tasked with developing the next edition of Warhammer. That meant that once Mordheim was on shelves, he would soon have to step away to commit full-time to producing Warhammer 6th edition. At the same time, Jervis Johnson was leading the development of a new arm of Games Workshop design, Fnatic. They would take in specialist games and produce dedicated content, and Mordheim was one of the first games that they undertook. And in that new form, it would have a long life indeed. Fnatic took over publication of The Town Crier from White Dwarf, expanding it into a dedicated magazine and calling out to fans for their submissions of new material. The pages of the Crier would give rise to 2 new settings for the game, the verdant jungles of Lustria and the deathly deserts of Dust in Khemri. There would also be new warbands, including a force of deadly Amazons, orc mobs, dwarf treasure hunters, and Bretonnian knights. As well as all that, there were regular new rules, scenarios, and hired swords available as well. Several articles were bound together for a volume, The Best of Town Crier, and then in 2002, an annual was released as well. Like the core rulebook, the art design for the Town Crier was simply magnificent. At the end of each section, you'd find an array of in-universe adverts featuring silly jokes and fantastic world building, existing and new art pieces, elaborate borders and lettering, and the ever-present vigilance of the Owl Knight all contributed to making every issue valuable not just for adding rules to the game, but for adding to the world of the game as well. The typical release cycle for a late 90s Games Workshop non-core game was a large starter box, followed by 1 or 2 boxed expansions over the next year or so. Necromunda received Outlanders, Blood Bowl, Death Zone, and Gorka Morka got Digger Knob, but Mordheim never got a boxed expansion of its own. This seems to have been a result of the game's move to Fnatic, which meant it was no longer operating under the traditional release structure. In 2003, there would be a dedicated expansion book though, Empire in Flames. Written by Steve Hambrook, Mark Havener, Nick Kime, and Anthony Reynolds, the Empire in Flames supplement was designed to provide a new setting for the game, taking the action away from the devastated ruins of the damned city and into the savage, untamed wilderness of the Empire's forests. 2 new warbands were detailed in the book as well, the Ferocious Beastmen and the putrid, Nurgle-worshipping Carnival of Chaos. In 2007, Games Workshop ran a global event for Warhammer Fantasy Battle, the Nemesis Crown. A free supplement was bundled with White Dwarf 329 that told the story of the titular crown, a powerful magic artifact once thought lost that had now fallen into goblin hands, prompting the forces of the old world to enter the Great Forest in pursuit. A campaign booklet was also released online that enabled players to send Mordheimian warbands into the depths of the forest as well. This would provide new rules for warbands like the Null and Gunnery School, Forest Goblins, Dwarf Rangers, Black Orcs, and Imperial Outriders. Like Empire in Flames before it, it also provided new scenarios to take advantage of this new setting for the game. The range of Citadel miniatures released for Mordheim is quite frankly impressive. Everything from complete new warbands to extra characters, variant fighters, monsters, and even casualties that you can use as objective markers. There were even a range of architectural pieces so that you could bring more interest to your terrain, be it with ornate windows or hanging tavern signs. Some unreleased minis have since been rediscovered as well. Sculptors for the game's miniatures included Dave Andrews, Mark Bedford, Colin Dixon, Gary Morley, Ali Morrison, Trish Carden, Nee Morrison, Brian Nelson, Alan Perry, and Michael Perry. Even with the diversity of themes, races, and rogues, this entire range is brimming with character. By the time Mordheim stopped receiving official support from Games Workshop, there had already been, by some counts, as many as 40 warbands for the game, as well as 50 hired swords and dramatis personae. There were 29 issues of Town Crier, and 4 game settings, and 1 unknowable tarot card. And of course, there were 23 years of unbeatable Skirmish gameplay, with time for more. Even now, this game commands the respect and adoration from a vast number of fans. There are epic invitational tournaments, countless fan sites, an active and vibrant community, and in 2015, there was even a video game adaptation. Whether it was the brilliance of the initial concept, the immersive quality of the fiction-first design, the fearful symmetry of its darkly chaotic art, or just the fact that it is quite simply a brilliant, beautiful game, Mordheim remains one of the true classics of GW history, a game of enduring imagination that set the stage for the future of the Warhammer world in more ways than one. The back of this book says that it was produced in a mood of madness, and whilst I think that it must have taken some absolutely clear-eyed creative genius to make such a wondrous work, there is also so many square inches brimming with character and chaos and, quite frankly, brilliance that I have to concede that maybe there was a drop or two of madness in it as well. Just every single page and word in this book, every piece of art, every corner of every single piece of paper is fantastic. It is just an immersive, brilliant experience, even just reading it, let alone playing it. Mordheim has truly earned its place amongst the stable of classic GW games, because it's just so effective at what it does. I hope that you've enjoyed this exploration of the ruined streets of Mordheimian development history. I certainly enjoyed getting to spend more time with this classic game. If you did, feel free to leave a like, to leave a comment, and to subscribe to the channel. And if you would like to support the channel more, then you can check out my Patreon via the link in the description below. My patrons actually got to vote on this Mordheim video as a priority, so if you want to help influence what I look at next, that's a great way to do it. I'm also going to be releasing a fuller version of my interview with Tuomas Pirinen as an exclusive for my Patreon members, so if you're interested in that, why not check it out? I wouldn't have been able to complete this video without the very generous help of Tuomas Pirinen, who helped give me a view behind the curtain of the game's development. Thanks are owed to Tuomas, both for his creation of Mordheim in the first place, but also for the time he spent talking me through it. I would also like to thank Mira Manga for letting me use her footage from her interview with Tuomas, which I thoroughly recommend you go and check out in its entirety. You can do that via the link in the description below. Mira's channel has loads of really interesting interviews with lots of Black Library writers, amongst other things. There's loads of cool stuff on there, so definitely go and check out Mira Manga's channel. Thank you very much for watching. I am Jordan, and this is Jordan Sorcery. Well, you'll have to forgive me, but we've got to end it there. I wish we could go on talking, but we just don't have any more time. Please, I'm sorry.